The city was cold that evening. People walked fast, their coats wrapped tightly around them as they hurried past the metro station. No one noticed the thin woman sitting near the entrance, her arms wrapped around a small child. Her name was Mara, and she had been sitting there since the morning, hoping for kindness from strangers. But kindness was rare in a city that never stopped moving. Mara pulled her coat closer, though it was too thin to block out the cold. Her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, shivered in her lap, her small hands gripping her mother's shirt. She was hungry. Mara knew this because Lily had not spoken for a while. When Lily was quiet, it meant the hunger was worse. Mara sighed. She had no money, no home, and no idea what to do next. Every day felt like a battle, and she was tired of fighting. But she couldn't stop, not when Lily needed her. She looked at the people passing by, businessmen on phones, women carrying shopping bags, students laughing together. None of them saw her. None of them stopped. Then she made a decision. Mara had one thing left, her voice. She used to love singing. A long time ago, when life was different, she dreamed of singing on a big stage. But that dream was gone now. Reality was cruel, and dreams did not feed hungry children. Still, she had to try. She took a deep breath and started to sing. At first, her voice was soft, uncertain, but as she closed her eyes, the music came naturally, like an old friend she had not spoken to in years. Her voice rose, filling the air, floating through the crowd. It was a sad song, but it was beautiful. It told of love, loss, and hope, things Mara knew too well. A few people turned their heads, surprised. A mother walking with her son slowed down, listening. A man throwing a cigarette away hesitated. For the first time that day, Mara was not invisible. Lily stirred in her arms and whispered, "Mommy, I like this song." Mara smiled and kept singing. A few coins landed in the small plastic cup in front of her. Not much, but enough for a piece of bread. It gave her hope. Maybe, just maybe, tonight, they would not have to sleep on an empty stomach. The wind blew, making her shiver, but she didn't stop. The song was her only shield against the cold, against the loneliness, against the feeling that she had already lost. Then she noticed something strange. A black luxury car had stopped nearby. The engine was still running, but it did not move. Inside, through the half-lowered window, someone was watching her. Mara's voice shook for a moment. Who was this person? And why were they listening? She didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Mara's song slowed as she noticed the luxury car still parked nearby. The dark window was rolled halfway down, and inside, she could see a man's face. He wasn't like the others who passed by without looking. He was listening. For a moment, Mara felt nervous. Why was he watching? Was he going to tell her to stop? Some people didn't like street performers. Others looked down on homeless people. Was he one of them? Lily stirred in her lap. She lifted her small face, her cheeks red from the cold. "Mommy, is that man looking at us?" she whispered. Mara didn't know how to answer. She took a deep breath and continued singing. If this man was only curious, he would drive away soon like everyone else. It didn't matter. All that mattered was earning enough for food. She sang her heart out. The pain in her voice was real because she was living it. Her voice carried across the street, mixing with the sound of cars and footsteps. A few more people dropped coins into the plastic cup, but not many. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry," she said softly. Mara's heart ached. She stroked Lily's hair and gave her the last piece of bread she had saved from yesterday. It was small and a little dry, but Lily smiled as she ate it. Mara forced herself to smile back. She couldn't let her daughter see her worry. But inside, she felt helpless. How long could she keep going like this? Memories of a different life. As she sang, memories came flooding back. A different time, a different life. Mara was once full of dreams. She had wanted to be a singer, to share her music with the world. But life had taken a different turn. She had made choices, some good, some bad. And then one day, she had lost everything. Her parents had passed away when she was young. She had fallen in love, thinking it would save her. But instead, she had found herself alone, with Lily to take care of. She tried to find a job, but with no home, no money, and a child to care for, it was almost impossible. Singing was the only thing she had left. She sang louder, not just for the money, but because it reminded her of who she used to be. A part of her refused to give up. The car door opens. Then, something unexpected happened. The luxury car's door opened. The man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and had a serious expression. He walked slowly toward Mara, stopping just a few feet away. Mara's voice faltered for a second, but she kept singing. People around them glanced curiously, wondering what was happening. The man listened for a moment more, then spoke. "Who taught you to sing like that?" he asked. Mara's heart pounded. She didn't know it yet, but this man was about to change her life forever. Mara stood still, her voice suddenly lost. The man's question hung in the air, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Who taught her to sing? Her first instinct was to shrug it off. Most people, when they stopped to listen, usually ignored her after a few seconds. They didn't care about her past or her struggles. They simply saw a homeless woman trying to make money. But this man, he wasn't like the others. He stood there, waiting for an answer, his eyes still locked on hers. Mara cleared her throat and tried to compose herself. "I taught myself," she said quietly. Her voice felt shaky. She wasn't used to talking to strangers, especially not people who seemed so out of her world. The man raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's impressive. You have a beautiful voice." Mara felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't just a passing comment. Maybe this was the moment she'd been waiting for. The chance to change her life. But before she could respond, the reality of her situation hit her. She was still cold, still hungry, still alone. And no matter how nice his words were, it wouldn't change the fact that she had no home and no idea where her next meal would come from. Lily shifted in her arms, pulling Mara out of her thoughts. She whispered softly, "Mommy, I'm tired." Mara stroked Lily's hair gently, trying to comfort her. She didn't know how much longer she could keep singing, how much longer she could keep fighting. The man looked at Lily and then back at Mara. "She's beautiful. How old is she?" Mara smiled weakly. "She's 3. The man nodded, his eyes softening. He seemed to study her for a moment, like he was trying to understand something deeper. Finally, he spoke again. "I can help you." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. Help? She didn't know what he meant. What kind of help could a stranger possibly offer someone like her? But he wasn't looking at her with pity. He wasn't offering a handout or a few extra coins. There was something different in his eyes, something sincere. "What do you mean?" Mara asked cautiously. She needed to be sure before she got her hopes up. The man took a deep breath, then said, "I'm a music producer. I'm looking for someone with real talent. I'd like you to come to my studio and sing for me. I think you've got something special." Mara's heart skipped a beat. A music producer. She hadn't expected this. She felt a rush of emotions, surprise, fear, doubt, and even a little hope. This could be the opportunity she had been waiting for. But could she trust him? Could she believe that someone like her, someone with so little, was actually worthy of a chance? Before she could answer, the man spoke again. "Think about it, but don't wait too long. I'll be here for a while." He handed her a business card and smiled. Mara took it, feeling a mix of confusion and cautious optimism. As he walked back to his car, Mara stood there, staring at the card in her hand. Her mind was spinning. Could this really be happening? She glanced down at Lily, whose tired eyes were now looking up at her. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Lily asked softly. Mara smiled gently, trying to hide the uncertainty she felt. "We'll be okay, sweetie." I promise." But in her heart, she wasn't so sure. The night air felt colder as Mara watched the luxury car slowly pull away. Her hand still clutched the business card the man had given her. She could barely believe what had just happened. A music producer, someone who could help her, who actually wanted to hear her sing. She looked at the card for a long moment, her thoughts racing. Could this really be real? Or was it just another empty promise? Lily tugged at her sleeve, her tired eyes still looking up at her mother. "Mommy, who was that man?" Mara smiled softly, trying to hide the uncertainty in her heart. "I don't know, sweetie, but I think he's someone who wants to help us." Lily's face lit up with a tiny smile. "Help us? How?" Mara didn't have the answers yet. She didn't know if this man's offer was a real opportunity or just another disappointment. But one thing was clear, this was a chance. She folded the business card carefully and stuffed it into her pocket. Maybe, just maybe, this was her moment. Mara took a deep breath. She couldn't waste this chance. A decision to make. The next morning, Mara woke up earlier than usual. The streets were still quiet, and the cold felt even worse now that the sun hadn't risen. She had spent the night on the street, curled up with Lily to keep her warm. The idea of the studio visit kept spinning in her mind. What if this was her only chance? What if she didn't go and lost the opportunity forever? But then another thought crept in. What if it was a mistake? Mara hadn't trusted many people in her life. Too many had promised to help her and then disappeared. She had been burned before. Could she really trust a stranger with a business card? Lily yawned and stretched in her arms, her small body warm against her mother's chest. Mara kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Let's go, Lily. We're going to take a chance." The studio visit. The next afternoon, Mara and Lily walked to the address on the business card. It was a short distance from the metro station, in a quieter part of the city. When they arrived, Mara hesitated for a moment, looking up at the tall building with large windows. It seemed so far from the life she knew, so out of her reach. But she didn't have time to second-guess herself. She took Lily's hand and walked inside. The lobby was quiet, and a receptionist greeted them with a friendly smile. Mara explained she was there for the audition, and the receptionist nodded, directing them down a hallway. As they walked, Mara's heart raced. What if she wasn't good enough? She had spent so long singing on the streets, but this was different. This was a real opportunity. At the end of the hall, they reached a large door. Mara knocked softly, her nerves getting the best of her. "Come in." She stepped inside the room. There was the man, Daniel Carter, sitting at a desk, typing on a laptop. He looked up when they entered, and his face broke into a warm smile. "Mara, I'm glad you made it." She took a deep breath. The room felt both welcoming and overwhelming at the same time. She had no idea what would happen next, but this was her chance to prove herself. Daniel stood up, motioning for her to sit. "I want to hear you sing." Mara nodded, her hands shaking slightly. She had to focus. She had to show him what she could do. This was her moment to shine. She opened her mouth and started to sing. As her voice filled the room, she felt something inside her shift. The nerves faded away, and the only thing that mattered was the music. A new beginning. When the song ended, Mara looked up. Daniel was silent for a moment, but then he smiled. That was incredible. Mara felt a wave of relief and hope. She didn't know where this journey would take her, but it felt like it was finally beginning. For the first time in a long time, she believed that things could get better. Mara sat nervously in the chair as Daniel listened to her sing. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice carried with the same raw emotion she had poured into every song on the street. She had sung for survival before, but now it felt different, important. This was her chance to show someone what she was capable of, not just to make a few dollars, but to prove she had real talent. When the song ended, she slowly lowered her gaze, afraid to look at Daniel. She had given everything she had, but would it be enough? Would he think she was just another street singer, someone who didn't belong in a real studio? For a moment, Daniel was silent. Mara's heart skipped a beat. Was he disappointed? But then he smiled. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was a genuine one. That was incredible, Mara. You have a voice that tells a story. His words were full of sincerity, and Mara could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had dreamed of someone, anyone, telling her she was good enough. But hearing it from someone like Daniel, someone who had worked in music, felt like a dream come true. I want to work with you. Mara blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Was this really happening? Daniel went on. I think you have something special. We can record some tracks, maybe even make an album. Mara felt a lump in her throat. She had never even imagined something like this. To have her voice recorded, to have her music shared with the world, it was almost too much to hope for. But Daniel wasn't done. I'd like to sign you to my label, Mara. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his words. Mara felt her heart race. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She couldn't believe what he was saying. A record label. Was this real? She looked over at Lily, who had been quietly sitting on a chair beside her. Her little face was still tired, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Mara's heart swelled with love for her daughter, and in that moment, she realized that this wasn't just about her. This was about creating a future for Lily, one filled with possibilities. I don't know what to say, Daniel. Mara finally found her voice, and it cracked slightly. I've never had anything like this before. I don't know if I deserve it. Daniel leaned forward, his expression softening. You do deserve it, Mara. Don't let fear stop you. You've already come so far. The words sank in. For so long, Mara had doubted herself. She had doubted her worth, believing that someone like her, someone with so little, could never have a chance. But now, for the first time, she saw a glimpse of possibility. Maybe she could really have a future. Maybe she wasn't just a homeless singer trying to survive. Maybe she could be someone who thrived. Daniel stood up and extended his hand. What do you say? Mara hesitated, her mind racing with questions and doubts. But then she thought about Lily, about the life they had been living, the cold nights, the hunger, the struggle. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. With a deep breath, Mara stood up and shook his hand. Yes, I'll do it. Daniel smiled, and something inside Mara shifted. It was like stepping into a whole new world, a world full of possibilities. As they walked out of the studio together, Mara felt lighter, like the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. This was just the beginning. Mara had taken a leap of faith, and she was about to soar. The following days felt like a blur to Mara. After agreeing to sign with Daniel's record label, everything seemed to move so quickly. She could hardly keep up with the changes in her life, but she didn't want to stop. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally moving forward. Her first recording session was both exciting and overwhelming. She had never imagined she would be in a real studio, with professional equipment and a team of people who wanted to help her. As Mara stepped into the studio, it felt like she was stepping into someone else's world. Everything was polished, clean, and shiny. But Daniel was there, offering encouragement. You belong here, Mara. Don't doubt yourself. Mara took a deep breath and looked around. She wasn't just a homeless woman anymore. She was a singer. This was her chance to show the world what she could do. As she stood in front of the microphone, she felt a wave of nervousness. Could she really do this? Could she record a song that would mean something to others? Ready when you are, Mara. Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. He was behind the control board, his eyes full of patience. Mara nodded and took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about everything she had been through. The struggles, the loneliness, the long nights spent wishing for something better. Then she began to sing. At first it was just a soft melody, a gentle start. But as she sang, her confidence began to build. She felt the emotion in her voice grow stronger. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a piece of herself. With every note, she poured her heart into it. She sang about hope, about dreams that seemed impossible, about the love she felt for Lily, and about the future she could finally see ahead of her. As the song finished, Mara opened her eyes and looked at Daniel. He was smiling, nodding his head. "That was perfect, Mara." He gave her a thumbs up. "I knew you had it in you." Mara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Perfect. Her. The woman who had been singing on the streets for scraps. The woman who had been living with so little for so long. "Really?" she asked, feeling a smile creep onto her face. "Really? You've got something special, Mara. That's why we're recording your first single today. You're going to change everything ***. Mara's heart raced. This was the moment she had dreamed about for years. She had spent so many nights doubting herself, thinking that her dreams were too far away. But here she was, in the studio, singing her heart out. This was her chance. This was her voice finally being heard. The song of hope. After the recording, Mara walked out of the studio with a feeling she had never known before. Pride. She wasn't just a singer anymore. She was an artist, someone who had something to say. The world outside the studio seemed different now. The streetlights didn't feel as cold. The air didn't feel as harsh. It was like the whole city had shifted, and Mara was walking through it with new eyes. Lily was waiting for her when she got home. Her daughter smiled up at her, and for the first time, Mara felt like she was truly giving her daughter a future, one full of hope and possibility. "Mommy, are we going to be famous?" Lily asked, her voice full of innocence. Mara smiled, bending down to give her a hug. "We'll see, sweetie. But one thing's for sure, we're going to be okay." Mara knew she had taken a huge step forward, but this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She had found her voice, and now it was time to let the world hear it. Weeks passed quickly, and Mara found herself in the studio more often than she had ever imagined. She had started recording a full album, and with each session, her confidence grew. Every note she sang felt more natural, more powerful. Her voice, once reserved for the streets, was now being shaped into something that could be shared with the world. The first single was ready to be released. The team at the studio was excited, and so was Mara. But there was a part of her that still couldn't quite believe it. She had gone from singing for spare change to recording professional tracks. It all felt like a dream. One afternoon, after a long day of recording, Mara sat in the studio lounge, waiting for Daniel to finish up a meeting. Her thoughts drifted back to the days when she had nothing but a small voice and a child to care for. Back then, she had never dared to imagine something like this. A real future in music, a future where she didn't have to worry about where their next meal would come from. As she sat there, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend, someone she hadn't heard from in a while. It was just a simple message. "How's everything going?" Mara smiled and typed back, explaining that things were finally starting to look up. She told her friend about the recording, about Daniel, and the record label. It was hard to put into words, but she knew her friend would understand. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. It was Lily, her daughter, calling from home. "Mommy, are you coming home soon?" Lily's voice sounded small over the phone, and Mara's heart swelled with love. "I'm on my way soon, sweetie. I miss you. I miss you too." There was a pause before Lily added, "Mommy, are we going to have a big house soon?" Mara's heart skipped a beat. She knew Lily had always wanted something more, something better. And now, thanks to the opportunity she had been given, Mara could finally give her that future. "Maybe one day, Lily, but no matter where we are, as long as we're together, we have everything we need." It was the truth. Love, not money or fame, was what mattered most. Mara hung up the phone and smiled to herself. For the first time, she felt like she was building something real, not just for her, but for Lily as well. As Daniel entered the room, he gave her a quick smile. "You're going to love the track we finished today." Mara stood up, excitement bubbling inside her. "Can I hear it now?" Daniel nodded, and they walked to the control room together. As they listened to the song, Mara felt something stir deep inside her, a sense of belonging. This wasn't just a song anymore. This was her story, her voice, her journey. When the song ended, Daniel turned to her. "It's ready, Mara. The world is about to hear your voice." Mara couldn't help but smile. This was it, the moment she had worked for, the moment that would change everything. Her music was about to be shared with the world, and it was a dream that she had nearly forgotten. As she left the studio that evening, a sense of peace filled her. She was no longer just the homeless woman singing on the streets. She was a singer, a mother, and someone who was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. And as she walked through the streets with Lily by her side, she knew they were heading toward a future full of possibilities. Mara couldn't believe how much her life had changed in just a few months. She had come so far from the days of singing on the streets, just hoping for enough money to feed Lily. Now she had a recording contract, her first album, and a growing fan base. But the biggest change of all was that she finally felt secure. For the first time in a long time, she was in control of her life. It wasn't just about the fame or success. It was about having a future. Mara no longer had to worry about what would happen tomorrow. She had a home, she had food, and she had her family by her side. Most importantly, she had a voice that was being heard by people who believed in her. One afternoon, Mara was sitting in her living room, looking over some emails about her upcoming performances. She was in the middle of replying to one when the doorbell rang. Surprised, she stood up and walked to the door. When she opened it, she was met by a woman she didn't recognize. The woman was holding a small child in her arms, and her face looked worn and tired. She seemed nervous but hopeful, and her eyes had the same look Mara had seen in the mirror all those months ago, the look of someone who was struggling but not giving up. "Hello, I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard about your story," the woman said, her voice shaky. I'm going through a tough time. I don't have anywhere to stay, and I have a little girl who's hungry." Mara's heart went out to the woman. She knew exactly what it felt like to have no place to turn, to feel like the world was crushing you. Without thinking, Mara stepped aside and motioned for the woman to come in. "Come inside. You don't have to apologize," Mara said with a warm smile. "Let's get you both something to eat." The woman looked surprised but grateful. She stepped inside, cradling her child closer to her chest. As Mara made them some tea and warmed up some leftovers, the woman began to talk. She explained how she had lost her job, how she had been living on the streets with her daughter, just barely scraping by. She felt like she had no options, no one to help her. Mara sat down beside her, listening intently. She could feel the woman's pain, and she knew how important it was to be heard in moments like these. When the woman had finished, Mara smiled gently and said, "I know what it's like to feel hopeless, but I'm telling you, things can change. You just have to keep going, even when it's hard." Mara gave the woman her number and told her about the community resources and shelters that could help. "You're not alone in this," Mara said softly. "I was once where you are. I'm here to help, just like people helped me." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She had thought there was no one left who cared, but Mara's words gave her a glimmer of hope, the first she had felt in a long time. Before the woman left, Mara gave her some extra food and told her to come back anytime. She wanted to be the person she had once wished for, the person who could offer a hand up, not just a handout. As Mara watched the woman leave, holding her daughter's hand, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always dreamed of helping others, and now she was doing it. Mara didn't just want to be known for her music. She wanted to be known for her kindness, for the way she used her success to make a difference. She wanted to be a voice for others, just like people had been a voice for her when she needed it most. And as she closed the door, looking out at the sunset, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would not only sing for herself, but for those who needed to hear her song the most. The months that followed were some of the busiest, but most fulfilling of Mara's life. Her debut album was released to much praise, and her voice resonated with so many people who had felt the same struggles she once did. But despite her rising fame, Mara never let it change her. She stayed humble, remembering the days when she had nothing but hope and a song in her heart. She continued to work hard, balancing her music career with her role as a mother. Every time she stepped on stage, she felt the same nervous excitement that had filled her when she first sang on the streets. But now, instead of singing for spare change, she sang for something much bigger, for the people who needed to hear her story. One evening, after a successful concert, Mara was sitting in her dressing room, looking over her schedule for the upcoming months. The tours, the interviews, the photo shoots, it was all a whirlwind. But for a moment, she paused and thought back to that cold day when she had sung on the streets, unsure of where her life was headed. As she looked at Lily, who was now playing quietly in the corner, she realized how far they had come. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living, truly living. Mara had made a promise to herself that no matter how far she went in her career, she would always make time for what truly mattered, her daughter and her community. That evening, as they sat together, Mara thought about all the people who had helped her along the way. Daniel, who had given her a chance, the fans who supported her music, and even the strangers she had helped, knowing how much a simple act of kindness could change someone's life. Mara decided to start a charity, one that would support single mothers and families who had nowhere to turn, just like she once had. It would focus on providing shelter, food, education, and most importantly, hope. She wanted to give back in a way that would make a real difference. As the weeks went by, her charity began to grow. People who had supported her music also supported her cause, donating time and money to help those in need. Mara found herself standing in front of a crowd once again, but this time it wasn't for a performance. It was to speak about her mission, about how everyone, no matter where they came from, deserved a chance to succeed. One day, as Mara was walking through the charity center, she met a woman who had just started to get back on her feet. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a single mother who had lost her job and home. But now, thanks to the charity, she was in a safe place, and her young son was attending a local school. Rebecca smiled as she thanked Mara for all she had done. "You've changed my life. You gave me hope when I had none." Mara smiled back, feeling a warmth in her heart. She had done more than just change her own life. She had helped others find the hope she once thought was lost forever. As she looked around at the families in the center, the children laughing and playing, Mara realized that this was the real reward of everything she had worked for. Not the fame, not the success, but the chance to make a difference. She knew that the journey she had started on was far from over. There were still many more lives to touch, many more people to help. But as she walked through the center with Lily by her side, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had found her purpose, not just as a singer, but as someone who could bring light into the lives of others. And with that, Mara knew that no matter where life took her next, she was ready.